G'day, how you going? What do you know? They'll strike a light. G'day, and how you going? Just say g'day, and you'll be right.
Welcome to the Midweek End Times News and Trends Briefing as we share major events and what is happening around the world as it relates to Bible prophecy. Today's date is Wednesday, August 10th, 2016. Another amazing busy week when it comes to Bible prophecy as things are heating up all around the world, even what's going on right now in Rio de Janeiro. Breaking news just popped up out of the Mirror website that said media bus shot at traveling between Rio Olympic venues. So passengers had been watching women's basketball and were taken back to the media center in the Olympic Park when they were attacked. That's all the news was flashing at this moment. Also, speaking of what's going on at the Olympics, a BBC reporter was forced to apologize for a homophobic remark that sparked outrage online. This also came out of the Mirror website. And the commentator was talking about how he didn't want to see two men kissing, which sparked a fury on social media. This whole political correctness is getting out of hand, where you can't have an opinion. If this commentator, for example, would have been say for example, if he was gay, and he said this about heterosexuals, about male or female or husband, wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend kissing, there would be no backlash. But there is a double standard when it comes to this issue. There's a real push to really force the world to accept an immoral, unnatural lifestyle. Now, this doesn't mean you don't treat these people with respect or love or dignity, but you don't have to accept one's lifestyle. And if you say something against it, you get penalized, or you get fined, or you get fired if you disagree with it. But this is going to continue to get worse and worse as time goes on. On to another issue, dealing with Iran and Israel. Out of the Huffington Post came up with this particular report, and how the tensions between Israel and Iran appears to be heightened, because this report says that Iran is ready to attack Israel. According to the deputy commander of the Iran's Revolutionary Guard, he said recently, in another report we even mentioned it, how Hezbollah has 100,000 missiles that are ready to hit Israel to liberate the occupied Palestinian territories if the Zionist regime repeats its past mistakes. He also added that today the grounds for annihilation and collapse of the Zionist regime are present more than ever. He warned that if Israel was making the wrong move, it would come under attack. And so a few weeks ago, a senior advisor of the Iran Revolutionary Guard elite force, he said that Israel would be destroyed in less than 8 minutes if Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei gave the order. Also, in dealing with Iran, and this is kind of the whole Ezekiel 38-39 preparations, where this article out of the Decry website said Iran could have an operational nuke by 2017. According to this article, where the administration officials from the U.S. insisted that Iran would need a whole year to attain a breakout capacity of nuclear weapon programs. And so Iran is now in a position, by the way, to assemble its enriched facilities within 45 days. The calculation of that time Iran would need to build a nuclear bomb was based on the quality of low-grade enriched uranium, or LEU, left with Iran further refinement to weapon-grade level. However, Iran had since been revealed that it has been cheating on provisions too by transferring much of the larger LEU stock to Oman and continue to clandestine to turn out further quantities disguised as materials required for research. So all this information adds up to Iran's current ability and means of production for breaking out to development developing a nuclear weapon within months up until the end of 2017. After making strides in their missile program, the Iranians would soon be able to mount up a nuke on an intercontinental ballistic missile, which could wipe out a European or Middle East city. Also, speaking of the Middle East, Russia, according to the Times of Israel, not Hezbollah, sent drone into Israel, according to this report. So a drone that crossed into northern Israel last month belonged to Russia, not Hezbollah, was initially suspected. The unmanned aerial vehicle entered Israeli airspace from Syria on July 17th. The Israeli Defense Force attempted to shoot down the aircraft 3 times but failed. Israel's security services initially suspect the Lebanon-based terrorist group Hezbollah was responsible for the breach. However, Russian officials admitted that their Israeli counterparts that the drone was in fact theirs, according to the newspaper report. While the Russian officials claimed the incident was a result of human error, it is possible the Russian military was testing Israel's aerial defense capabilities. And again, there's no accident there. I don't think it's human error. I think it's a part of surveillance. So it's all part of this Ezekiel 38:39 potential war invasion. So they're just scoping out the land. Also, and speaking of Russia, this report came out of the BBC website that talked about how Putin offers Turkey's Erdogan closer ties. So Russia is ready to restore economic cooperation and other ties with Turkey. So President Vladimir Putin has told his Turkish counterpart Erdogan in St. Petersburg. So the Turkish president is its first foreign visit since the attempted coup last month, and Erdogan thanked Mr. Putin, saying that your call straight after the coup attempt was very welcome. The Russian-Turkish relations soured last November when Turkey shot down a Russian bomber on the Syrian border. The visit comes as Turkey ties with the West have cooled over criticism of Mr. Erdogan's purge of the alleged coup plotters. And so before leaving Turkey, Erdogan referred to President Putin as a friend and said he wanted to have an open and new page in the relations with Russia. It's all part of that alliance that is coming together for the Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38, and again, the pieces of the puzzle getting closer and closer. On the issue of the rise of Islam and terror attacks, Pakistan Taliban splinter group claims responsibility for the bombing that happened the other day, where 70 people were killed in a bombing down in Pakistan. Near this hospital, and many of those that were killed in this particular blast were believed to be lawyers and journalists who gathered at the hospital to mourn and report on the death of a lawyer that had been gunned down earlier in that day. So the explosion at the hospital on Monday also injured 112 others, said the health minister of that western part of the country. And the explosion at 9:30 a.m. local time rocked the emergency ward of a civil hospital. It was the scene of utter horror and devastation in the Courtyard Hospital, according to a Wall Street Journal report that was mentioned on CNN station. And there's bodies scattered everywhere, as he describes it, bleeding lawyers trying to get up. So a splintered group of Pakistan's Taliban was claiming responsibility for both the hospital blast and also this lawyer that was shot earlier that day, according to the spokesman for the group. Also, speaking of terrorism, Belgium police machete attack, Knifeman shouting Allahu Akbar, and hacks 2 female officers in the face, according to the Mirror website. And the report talks about how a machete-wielding man yelling Allahu Akbar that injured 2 female police officers before being fatally shot. The attacker was shot by a 3rd officer and subsequently died of his wounds, but the police officers were out of danger, according to the police report. Initial indications clearly points toward terrorism from the Prime Minister as he was interviewed on a television station. And so the attacker from what they said, had been taken out, a machete, and when two officers asked to search him at a checkpoint set up outside the city's police headquarters as part of the security measures imposed after the major Islamic attacks last month, 9 months in Belgium and neighboring France. Back in March, if you remember, Islamic bombers killed 32 people in a suicide attack at the Brussels airport and metro station. In addition, many of those who carried out the attacks in Paris last November, which killed 130 people, were based in Belgium. This Saturday's incident also follows a series of attacks in the last several months, mostly in France and Germany, many of which have been claimed by the militant group ISIS. Onto another report in dealing with the New World Order and the UN 2030 agenda, as it's nice to hear someone who's a politician actually calls it like it is. This report came out of the BBC News report, how Australian Senator Malcolm Roberts calls the climate change a UN conspiracy. And if you were to look at it, it's a $22 billion industry where there is just a fraud when it comes down to it. But one of Australia's newest elected senators said that climate change is a global conspiracy created by bankers seeking to establish a worldwide government. Malcolm Roberts, who won the Queensland Senate seat, is a member of the anti-immigration One Nation Party in recent elections, and he said that the United Nations is using climate change to lay the foundations for an unelected global government. He's got previous writing that indicates that he believes in a shadow group of bankers that's controlling the world affairs, and he's not too far off the mark. It's refreshing, like we said, to have someone tell it like it is and to expose the corruption that's out there, to understand that there is a global government that will be putting in place, and it's will be led by the Antichrist. Also, in this whole climate change issue, it even stemmed all the way to the opening Olympic ceremony in Brazil. They go on this big promotion on promoting climate change. In the Olympics, by the way, it's a fantastic event when it comes down to it, but there's so many New World Order agenda to that's behind this event, to condition and to brainwash people by the masses, by the different ceremonies that take place, especially opening ceremony. And each one adds a little more components to this propaganda, if you will. But the Rio 2016 opening ceremony was a mix of patriotism. You celebrate your country, and also climate concern. This report came out of the Guardian website, how the country's political climate was never far from the service. And again, there is always going to be a political agenda behind the Olympics. And the acting president of Brazil was loudly booed when he was declaring the games to be open because of the corruption that's happened in the nation for a long time. When Danny Boyle marked out the start of the London Games in 2012 with the Ring of Fire, Rio's, they formed the trees to reflect the environmental theme that run through its opening ceremony. The article did go on to talk about the opening ceremony and the different components of it, and he also mentioned that each athlete was given a seedling plant in a new forest that will be planted that's in one of the zones out there in Brazil that includes part of the rugby sevens, the shooting, hockey, and some other sports. There's 12,000 seeds that will form the athletes' forest from 208 species, each one for a competing delegation. So, and I'm all for planting and all that sort of stuff, but under this whole umbrella of climate change is just a lie. But in the midst of other concerns, much of the focus of the buildup had been the failure to keep the promises to clean up the waters in the bay there where the sailing's taken place. And so every Olympics has its issues and problems, but you see down there in Brazil, They're almost the murder capital of the world. But you see the pollution that's there, the problems within that country. It shouldn't have really gone there, but again, you see the political agenda behind it all. Also, speaking of propaganda on a different subject, according to the WND website, had this report how demons are just innocent fun in a new TV project. So this was a new series that's going to be shown on Fox, and I think it's called The Exorcist, getting a reboot. And once again, the media is going to use the subjects of demons and exorcism as entertainment, with the film that happened back in 1973, The Exorcist, and it's getting kind of a reboot in this new television series on Fox. So it comes at a time when real-life practice of exorcism is more popular than ever. There's more of a need for it than ever before, and there's such a warning that needs to be put in place of how real and how evil and dangerous the demonic realm is. But again, here's where you have this agenda being pushed, this propaganda to get people to not believe in God, to believe in demons, and to play with the demonic realm. On to another separate issue. This report came out of the Brett Bart report, and it was fascinating to read, and it just kind of proves the case about this whole transgenderism is absurd. But the article talked about how physicians decry pseudoscience of transgenderism absurd to anyone say that they're born into the wrong body. So according to the American College of Pediatricians, it had released a paper, position paper, denouncing the popular approaches to transgender, declaring the current protocol is founded upon unscientific gender ideology, which lacks any basis in any real evidence. The physicians argued that the assumption that the gender dysphoria, or GD, is a psychological condition which people experience a marked congruence between their experienced gender and their biological sex, is an innate contradicts all the relevant data and is based on ideology rather than science. Studies have shown, the authors contend that the perspective of a innate gender identity arises from parental feminized or masculized brains trapped in the wrong body is in fact an ideological belief that has no basis in rigorous science. GD is a problem that resides in the mind, not the body. The children with GD do not have a disordered body, even though they feel as they do, the doctors noted. Likewise, although many men with GD express their belief that they are feminine essence trapped in a male body, this belief has no scientific basis. Conditioning children who believe the absurdity that they or anyone could be born into the wrong body, and that the lifetime of chemical and surgical implantations of the opposite sex is normal and healthy is child abuse, the paper argues. The article goes on to say that the clinical studies suggest the social reinforcement, the parental pathology, the family dynamics, the social pollution facilitated by mainstream and social media all contribute to the development or the persistence of GD in some vulnerable children, the paper states, and therefore treating gender identity as if it were something to be explored and discovered is completely misguided, the doctors contended. In point of fact, studies have shown that gender dysphoria among children is radically reduced when they are not encouraged to impersonate the opposite sex, the authors noted. Encouraging gender fluidity and identity experimentation among children is one of the primary causes of gender dysphoria. So not telling the kids that this is not right and you shouldn't be doing this, but this is where this whole push of transgenderism is getting further and further because people are encouraging it. And in case you're wondering who the American College of Pediatricians is, it is a nationally organized of pediatrician and other healthcare professionals with members in 47 states and even other countries outside the U.S. The college membership includes such luminaries as Dr. Paul McHugh, who was the director of Department of Psychiatry and Behavior Science at Johns Hopkins University for 27 years, during the time which Johns Hopkins was the leading hospital in transgender studies. So they know what they're talking about. And then lastly, this one is so cool. It's in spreading the gospel, how the Swedish church uses drones to drop thousands of Bibles in ISIS-controlled Iraq. This report came out of the Christian Today, and the major evangelical church in Sweden is preparing to use drones to drop thousands of Bibles into an area of Iraq controlled by ISIS. This particular church, which is kind of north of in Sweden, has said that will use drones to fly at high altitudes to release thousands of small electronic Bibles into Iraq. And so the Bibles are the size of kind of a pill boxes, and will have a display. They don't require electricity. They work on their own. Interesting to see what it looks like, according to the missions director reporting on this. The ambition is to pass on the hope and love of the Christian gospel to a population living in closed areas where they are being denied human rights, according to the Swedish church homepage. And the church said that another organization in the area would be help carrying out the operation, but it didn't name the group. And so they're going to say that they're going to be starting this project in a couple of weeks and hope to drop thousands of Bibles. I think this is such a cool and clever way to spread the gospel and the Word of God. And the thing, you know it, I know it, the time is short, and we need to do whatever we can to share the gospel, to be salt and light, to be pointing people to Jesus and telling people about Jesus. And I hope and I pray that each and every Christian will seize the opportunities that are in front of them for the glory of God. Amen. And that concludes today's update. Until next time, may the Lord radically and outrageously bless you.